President Biden in Saudi Arabia claiming he is talking tough with the oil-rich dictators over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and laughing off questions over his controversial fist bump with the country's crown prince.
With respect to the murder of Khashoggi, I raised it at the top of the meeting, making it clear what I thought of it at the time and what I think of it now. I said very straightforwardly, for an American president to be silent on an issue of human rights, is this inconsistent with who we are and who I am? He basically said that he was not personally responsible for it. I indicated I thought he was. Yes.
You're coming under a lot of fire for your fist bump with the Crown Prince. Why? I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that. But also, how can you be sure that another incident, another murder like Jamal Khashoggi's won't happen again?
Well, God love you. What a silly question. How could I possibly be sure of any of that?
The president is under enormous pressure to bring down surging gas prices with the trip, with Democrats in his own party getting tired of his inflation spin.
I think that we have a responsibility in leadership to be honest with people, to not try to spin them, and then we have a responsibility to chart the way forward. It doesn't mean that there's a silver bullet on fixing inflation. I want to be just straight about that, and then I want to say, here's the plan, here's the path.
But was it all for nothing? At least one report indicates Biden will be coming back home with no announcement on producing more oil, but have no worries. While he might not get any more oil, he is making moves on green energy.
Saudi Arabia will also partner with us on a far-reaching clean energy initiative focused on green hydrogen, solar, carbon capture, nuclear, and other projects to accelerate the world's clean energy transition and to help the U.S. clean energy industry set global standards.
When will we see the impact of this visit?
I suspect you won't see that for another couple weeks. And we'll see more when we see gas stations start to lower their price consistent with what they're paying for the oil.
So I'll start with you, Geraldo. The president has done everything he can to trash the Saudis and to destroy American energy independence. And so he goes over there, hat in hand, to ask for more oil. And instead of delivering the goods, there was no announcement that we're getting more oil. What he does is he announces that we're going to be partners with Saudi Arabia on green energy. What is wrong with this man?
I think it's a discordant note, to say the least. I don't understand why he went there, why he had to go there, knowing that he's being criticized for emphasizing electric vehicles and so forth at a time when gas prices are going through the roof. I will say to the president's, in his defense, gas prices have been trending down, a couple of pennies every day, and it's been every day for almost the last month now. To me, the biggest thing about this visit to Saudi Arabia came right in the last hour or two. The announcement that there was this deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel, where Israeli planes can now land in Saudi Arabia and vice versa. This is a huge deal. Saudi Arabia, of course, is the keystone of the anti-Israeli Arab bloc. And if we can get normalized relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, I think that is a huge, huge step. These islands in the Red Sea, I know them, sailed past them. A lot of tension over the years between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. That looks like it's going to be in the past right now. It does seem to me that there is meaningful progress, not on the energy front, ironically, maybe bitterly ironically, because we need it, but on the political front, whereby Saudi Arabia now joining many other the Arab states in normalizing relations with Israel.
All right.
The Abraham Accords going on.
Yeah, so we don't really give Biden credit for this, do we? I mean, Biden didn't do this. The guy can barely get over there and, decide whether he's going to shake his hand or fist bump. So as for the fist bump, I'll go to you, Tyrus. What's with the fist bump?
I don't know. I guess if a handshake or a fist bump somehow, just because you pull the fingers back, it's different, but the same. It's laughable. I also like the fact that he said, I don't believe him, but he told me he didn't do it. So, and then I said, I think he didn't do it. And the only thing they said, they'll partner with us with clean energy. When is that going to be? Because right now we got enough partnering with green energy. When are we going to see some actual stuff? That was the longest speech about nothing. And the fist pump was probably more on the other side. The prince was like, I don't want to shake this guy's hand. I want to acknowledge him. Okay, Briz. Yeah, there you go. Go. And there was they didn't come out together with a great announcement. There was nothing. He just came back and he said basically everything that he was going to do, he didn't really do. But stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, it looked like a perfunctory fist bump, but aside from
Like
that,
a one knuckle.
Yeah, but Lawrence, what's interesting is that you shook your head when I said it seems like he's trying to take credit for work that's been done by other presidents.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same
that.
thing. The Trump administration had already set the stage for these negotiations. Other countries had already signed in. Obviously, he didn't get a second term, and so those negotiations were already put intact. It's the same thing that he does when it comes to the vaccine. He takes credit for it. He didn't help get it done. If Biden was in office, it would be the same bureaucratic system. But there's a lot of stuff to deal with right here at this press conference. I take you back to the Trump years during when Russia meddled in our election, and everybody was hyping up this first visit with Donald Trump when he was supposed to meet Vladimir Putin. Now, it's important to know also that President Trump had already started to put sanctions, record sanctions on the Russians. So he gets there and he looks at Putin in the eye and he says, just don't meddle in our elections anymore. Now, this is after he's actually taken action. Joe Biden goes and they hype this meeting up. He says that he confronts him about Jamal Khashoggi. Then he fist bumps the guy. I mean, there's really no action being taken. The family is criticizing him for this. I'm just saying the media went crazy over that incident, yet they're pretty silent when it comes to this. But there's so much happening domestically here when it comes to inflation. You see the party abandoning him right now. You see the Democratic strategists, they don't want to be involved with him. You hear back channel talk from the Obamas, they're talking about it. But they're not upset about the job that he's doing. They're upset that they're losing, and their narrative of identity politics and the spin, and they thought Roe v. Wade was going to be a killer issue for them, and it's just simply not working. But we should have expected this from Joe Biden. He stayed in the basement for the majority of the time. I don't understand why the media is upset. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. If this was any other industry, it would have been considered malpractice what's happening in this country. It is the media's job to be the watchdog of the American people when it comes to these politicians. It's not like a lawyer where you have a board, a bar to investigate you. It's not like a doctor to have a state board to investigate, or teachers, anything. The watchdog is the press, and Biden is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. We're just being harmed in the process.
You know what? The idea that even the Democrats don't believe a word that this president says, and yet, as Lawrence says, they won't criticize him. They don't criticize him. When Trump was president, every day, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a liar.
Yeah, well, first, I think, the questions from the press corps are never really on behalf of the American people who want answers about when their lives are going to get better and when things are going to cost less for them. But the headline that President Biden didn't walk away from this meeting with any kind of new agreement to pump more oil, he has no intention of significantly lowering gas prices because they have an intention to transition the country away from fossil fuels onto what they think is going to be this new alternative energy utopia. And so they can't lower gas prices because that would ruin that agenda when they say, well, if gas is too high, then you should be buying an electric car. At the same time, they're pushing that agenda, including in Saudi Arabia. You have California telling people who own Teslas or other electric vehicles not to plug in during peak hours because they may have blackouts and brownouts. You have people in the Dutch protesting because the government is infringing on their personal property rights to push this green agenda. And you also have Europe essentially, turning their coal plants back on. They're in an emergency crisis when it comes to natural gas because of what Russia has done in Ukraine. So the alternative energy agenda is a very painful one, but the pain is the point from this administration. They have no intention of reducing prices for Americans at the pump. And in terms of Democrats now coming to terms right before an election about how things are too expensive, about inflation, well, they did this. This is their fault. Republicans did not vote for the American Rescue Plan, which shot inflation through the roof. Okay, that was all Democrats. And the problem with inflation is you can't put it back. So.
Well,
voters are looking at it and saying, who did this? And they're looking right at the Democrats.
Well, it's just like the president saying, we're going to have a little pain, but we want democracy in Ukraine. And as a result, your gas prices will go up.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.